Hey, this is Dr. Michael Abernathy again, and we're starting a short series to remind you of doing one thing, learning one thing, and then one thing to plan on. Now, if you saw our first video, you have already received a blog along with some links to 6 different articles. And the overall push of those articles was diagnosing yourself, actually understanding exactly where you are or where you were. And so we need you to have that information, because the first topic we're gonna touch on, the one thing to do is to set a budget. And Max and I talk to doctors all the time on the phone. I can't remember one office that actually had a budget. I mean, they vaguely knew that they needed to have around 6% for dental supplies, but they never matched their income to their expenses, and they never really set goals or a budget to make this happen. Now, if you're starting a practice or you're recovering, you come back to work and you're trying to recover your practice, then this is going to be real important. I mean, when I think of budgets, I think of a profit and loss statement. I think the mistake in thinking of a profit and loss statement as profit and loss is natural, because that's what the CPA gives you. But in a profit and loss statement, not all your expenses are there. So we at Summit tend to take a profit and loss statement, and then just by modifying the chief categories, we create 7 different categories. Now, your one thing to do this week or after this video is to take a traditional profit and loss and change it in this format. So I'm going to explain this to you real quickly. Now, normally you have employees, that would include associates, hygienists, anybody that you pay as an employee, even a part-time employee, that you have expenses for. Not just taxable expenses, but anything you might pay them or have to spend to have those people there. Workman's comp, continuing dental education, uniforms, any type of benefit, anything at all that you would spend. That will be our first topic. So you'll take your profit and loss statement and you'll walk down the list of all the items you have, and you place anything that you spent for an employee under there. Now, it does not include you. There is a category for you, okay? Second would be facility. And this is a little bit counterintuitive in that it's not just your building. It's everything physically that you have to spend to make this work. So if you had insurance on your lease space, that would be in there. Maintenance would be in there. Utilities would be in there. Telephone would be in there. People working on your computer would be in there. Security would be in there. Anything at all that you would spend on your facility. Now, if you just bought a practice, okay, and you're making a payment on that belongs in there. Now, the important differentiation here is that you're going to notice that when you look at profit and loss, there is no debt service in there. Okay, there's not a line item that says I'm paying X number of dollars for a CEREC machine or a 3D cone beam. Those aren't on a profit and loss statement. They would be on a cash flow statement, they're not on a profit and loss statement. So the only thing you're going to find in your profit and loss statement is interest expense, which would be the interest on that note payment that you're paying. Now, we want to add back in those note payments. So if you had a payment on the facility or a payment on equipment, it would all go under facility cost. Now, in compensation, our goal is around 25%. If you wanted to include a CPA or an attorney, which are part-time people, a consultant, whatever, because you're expecting a return on investment, 27, 28% is fine. But somewhere around there, including taxes, every expense on the facility should run around 7 to 9%. Now, you'll notice we're giving you a benchmark, a target to shoot at. The next one might be dental supplies. I would say 6% or below. If you really work on this, you certainly can get it below 6%. Lab expenses. And if you've already done that self-diagnosing yourself, you know how much detail we've gone into explaining each one of these categories. So a lab should be around 8 to 10%. And that's 8 or 10% even if you're getting a $70 Emax or zirconium crown, okay? Reflects, and those, having done that, diagnose yourself, you'll know what the implications of these things being high or low. Marketing should be around 3 to 5% of your collections, but if you're in a really bad location, like a professional building, you're up 5 stories, there's no signage, there's no way to know that you're there, you need to add $3,000 or $4,000 a month, okay? Goes into that on self-diagnosing yourself. When you look at office supplies, sometimes CPAs have a tendency to dump things into certain categories. It might be miscellaneous, it might be office supplies, but if it was truly office supplies, it should be less than about 2%. And then we have a category just for you. Now, again, that category, while you can write off the cost on what you actually are spending on yourself, like writing off a certain amount on your automobile, your cost of continuing education, your malpractice insurance, anything at all that you spend on yourself that we write through the office is still going to be there. Well, we're going to put that under you. The whole thrust of coming up with a budget is to try to determine what your hard overhead cost, whether they're fixed or variable expenses. You have that in a format that you can take and look at the percentages like it's listed for compensation, percentage amount. I don't care what the dollar amount is. If we're at 25 to 27%, I'm happy. Marketing, 3 to 5%. If I'm in that percentage range, I don't care. It could be $20,000 a month, okay? It's looking at these percentages. So doing this one thing, setting up a budget and doing it in a way that you use your profit and loss statement and turn it into a cash flow statement will make that happen and make it very easy to use that now cash flow statement to make management decisions. Now, one thing to learn, we need to go back and historically look at what you've been doing. Now, I'm assuming that you're going back and using about 12 months. If you're close to the end of a previous year, just use the last year. Doesn't matter if it's 3 or 4 months off. If you're almost done with the year, then again, use the current year. But the longer period of time, that 12-month period, you're going to have a better historical look at what's going on. Now, one of the overhead numbers that in diagnosing yourself was determining what you were spending on staff as a percentage of your collections and what you were spending per operatory in your expenses. Now, when we look at that, I've never seen an overhead that did well if we weren't pretty close to $20,000 to $25,000 production per employee, and that would include associates, include hygienists, include everybody, just not you, okay? And or 25 to 30,000 per op. If they're not pretty close to those numbers, you're always going to have a very high overhead. And in the series that we're doing here on the optimized dental practice, we're giving you targets that you can hit and that are important to hit. So the last thing that kind of comes to mind in things you need to learn is that hygiene is a integral part of you being profitable. And if hygienists can't produce at least 3 times what they're paid, okay, you're not going to have an overhead that's ideal. Now, so the one thing to plan is setting up this list of 7 categories, the goals, which again, you have in that self-diagnosis deal. Set it up and see how close you can hit those targets. See if you can actually lower the cost for staff compensation by increasing your production, not necessarily paying somebody less, but increasing your productivity per employee. See if you can utilize the capacity of your facility where you're at 25 to 30,000 per op. Okay. Make sure that your hygiene department is adding that increment of collections and earning and helping patients want what they need so that productivity, both on their side or on your side, can be high enough that your overhead can end at, I mean, ideally it should be below 60%. If you've got an associate, ideally it should be well below 65%. So all of these things are important. All of these things are doable. That's your lesson for today.